Hurricane Helene, a Category 4 hurricane, pressure down to 945 millibars, 130-mile-an-hour winds, and still a couple hours to go before it makes landfall. Hurricane warnings pushed all the way up into in the interior areas of Georgia. Tropical storm warnings as far north as Tennessee. Uh, Never seen something quite like this, folks. Doesn't happen too often. But when it does happen, you know that you can keep abreast of all of this by watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And if you'd like to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, there is a link pinned to the top of the chat board. And on the descriptor to this video, it's an Amazon referral link. So if you use that link to do your Amazon shopping, Amazon will throw us back a little bit of coin. It doesn't come out of your pocket, it comes out of Amazon's. And it's a great way to support my podcast. And we have reduced significantly the amount of commercials running during the show. In fact, we've reduced them down to zero. So um, if you shop on Amazon, we can keep doing that. So there we go. So anybody had the Category 4 hurricane on their bingo card, or if that's where they thought that this might wind up, you were right. We got to Cat 4 just a couple of about an hour or so ago, and there's a recon aircraft, Joe, that's still there. So the first pass was 9:47, and then the most recent one 9:45, and that's where we're at now. And it might get a little bit deeper. It's running out of time because it is going to make landfall, and now the big question is the acceleration, the forward speed that's going to probably increase to about 30 miles an hour or more once it gets inland. So it's going to traverse from the time it makes landfall by uh, 12 hours from now. It's going to be up in the northern part of Georgia. There's going to be some rip roaring wind with that core that's going to hold together.
It's going to be the equivalent of a buzz saw. We sometimes have spoken about the buzz saw effect with such storms as Andrew, for example, in 1992, cutting a path across central Florida. But this storm system really is going to be amazing. It's going to hit the Big Bend area of the Panhandle of Florida probably around 10 or 11 o'clock tonight, and then it will continue on northward right up into the state of Georgia. And this is going to be a memorable storm, I'm sure, for Georgia. And Joe, it'll be interesting to see how much wind and rain you get. You're in Atlanta, but already you
Right.
said that based upon checking with your weather station at your house, that you've already had over 4 inches of rain.
4 inches, yeah, 2 inches, a little less than two. I think I had 1.89 last night and 2.21 so far today. Most of that was this morning. It hasn't been, at least up in northern Georgia where I am. Um, it hasn't really been raining too hard, but I got to be careful because if I'm talking about one spot, you don't have to go too far. Western North Carolina, where I'm only about 20 miles from there, but you go into Western North Carolina, some of the mountains there, and in northwestern South Carolina, it has really rained hard today. I mean, at one point I was looking at in South Carolina, Joe, about three-quarters of the state was under a flash flood warning. I mean, that's just how much moisture is there. I don't know what the rainfall totals have been there, but some areas have already gotten hit hard with rain. And when that core comes up, whoever's gets inside that in terms of rainfall rates, I mean, for probably about 4 or 6 hours, you could easily put down a half a foot or of rain or more in that time frame. It's going to rain quite hard when that core moves up.
Well, there's no question about that. And my goodness, the one thing I want to do point out is that if there's any bit of a saving grace, it's that there are not too many heavily populated areas in the Big Bend part of Florida. In fact, if you take a good hard look on the map, you can see that there are a lot of wildlife refuge areas in that area, that vicinity. Uh, the big cities, well, of course, it's Tallahassee. but that's more to the north and they're going to get pounded. And other spots, to the north and east, Jacksonville, for example. But again, the storm is not going to be heading directly in the path of either of those two cities. But nonetheless, there's going to be, and you also have to consider the fact that being so wide open and so rural, that any power that is in that area, power lines or any ways to generate power. I mean, after this storm, no question, they're going to have to just rebuild the whole infrastructure, and that may take not just a couple of days, folks. That may take weeks, maybe even months. So if you have a home and you're, you know, getting your power from lines that are in the vicinity of the landfalling hurricane, it may be quite a while before you get power back after this night is over.
There is a buoy, Joe. There is a buoy that is out. It's buoy 42036 at 28 and a half and 84 and a half. And the wind there is uh, northeast at 65, gusting to 94.
Wow.
Okay. So that's, so the center is probably just to the southeast of that buoy. In the Tampa area, we're looking right now at some gusts. St. Petersburg Clearwater Airport here has a gust of 69. Uh, the Tampa International Airport, which is kind of on the other side of the bay, is a little further inland. They're gusting to 37. I mean, there's a lot of stations here that are easily gusting 40 to 50 along the coast. Uh, just Bel Air is gusting to 49. We've got a station down here at no, that's the wrong one. Albert Wilted or Whitehead Airport is 52, gusting to 70. I mean, these places on the coast are actually, and the center is still a fair distance offshore. These places on the coast are blowing away at the moment. Here's another one further up. Cedar Key right now is gusting to 57. My daughter's cat thinks it's a good idea to chew on my electrical cord. Go away. Go away. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not kidding. On the coast, further up, further north, seeing a lot of places. St. Mark's, Florida, gusting only there 21. Alligator Point, which is at 29.9 north, 84.4 west, right on the coast. They're gusting to 47. Just looking at the winds, who are the wind directions, they're mostly southeast, going up to Florida, Big Bend, until you start to get to the top of it and you begin to move westward, and those winds turn northeast. So I mean, it looks like it's going to go inland a fair distance east of Apalachicola, but just kind of at the point where the Florida Big Bend, the northern part of the Florida Big Bend, looks like where we're going to see landfall probably in about 3 hours or so.
I would agree with you, completely agree with you. And you were talking about the rather exceptional rainfall totals along the western, excuse me, over the western sections of North Carolina and for northwestern sections of South Carolina. The main reason for that, and we were talking about that yesterday, is a phenomenon known as orographic lifting. The winds, the winds that are going to be blowing on the front side of the storm are going to push those winds up and over the top of the tall mountain peaks that are located along the western sections of North Carolina and also northwestern South Carolina. When you push the air upwards, you lift it, and you lift it right up along those mountains to such a degree that you cause the moisture to be literally squeezed out or accentuated. And so that's why right along that mountain chain there, you're seeing the potential of rainfall totals perhaps in excess of 16 inches. That again is up in the mountains. And I notice also, Joe, that the National Weather Service, or NOAA, has placed a high risk of at least 70% chance of flash flooding, greatest flash flood risk, literally right through the from the Panhandle area of Florida. Tallahassee is like right smack in the middle of that zone for flash flooding, 70%, and it goes right up through the middle of Georgia, which also encompasses Atlanta, Georgia, and goes up into, again, northwestern South Carolina, and right along that western end of North Carolina, right across where the mountains are. 70% chance of flash flooding. Of course, you'd expect flooding of some sort if you're going to be getting anywhere between like 8 and 16 inches of rain. And the threat of marginal flash flooding of at least 5% runs from eastern North Carolina through eastern Virginia and all the way up into southern and central sections of Pennsylvania and westward to central Ohio.
So
So all
you're looking now here at uh, I just put the excessive rainfall maps up for you while you were talking. So I got this one is the one for tonight into Friday morning. And, and it's got that high risk, like you said, from the Florida Panhandle up into the Western Carolina mountains. And then they got the marginal risk uh, just reaching into Southern Ohio and West Virginia. So now are you looking at tomorrow's risk area now?
well, I was looking actually on the NHC, which I guess is a composite,
A composite? Okay, gotcha.
composite of the whole of the whole
I'll bring
whole
that up
storm
then.
over.
Hang on a second. Let me just bring that up so that you can have it on the screen while you're talking about it.
But
Um,
what makes it such a high risk for flash flooding? Flash flooding, I mean, of course, there's the word flooding right there, and that tells you that, yeah, there's going to be a lot of water. But flash, what does that mean? Flash means that all of this is going to happen in a relatively short interval of time. We're talking about a storm, and Joe just mentioned this a few moments ago, that will start at landfall later this evening, say around 10 or 11 o'clock tonight, at the Florida Panhandle in the Big Bend area. And then over a span of like 8 to 12 hours, it's going to rocket north all the way up through Georgia, reaching the area around Georgia, North Carolina by sometime mid morning tomorrow. That is tremendously rapid movement for a tropical system. And because of the process which we call frictional drag, that storm is going to literally get dragged right across the land very quickly, and you're going to see in some cases rainfall, rain totals again upwards to like 8, 10, 12, 16 inches, but you're going to see rainfall rates of on the order of maybe 2 to 3 inches per hour. 2 to 3 inches per hour. Now, just to give you some idea of just how much that is, here in the New York metropolitan area, during the month of September, typically we get about 4 inches of rain for the whole month. So, in some places along this path of this hurricane tonight, they are going to see what we would see an entire month's worth of rain in a span of probably less than a couple of hours' time. That is heavy, heavy rain, and that certainly is going to lead to horrendous flooding conditions. Again, all along that track from Tallahassee through Atlanta and all the way up into the western end of North Carolina. Unbelievable.
got the loop up. And I mean, the eye is so well defined now. It took a while for it to get going. It appeared late last night, kind of filled up a little bit this morning, but once the rapid deepening got underway, and by the way, one of the changes when we were looking at this a couple of days ago and noticing all the dry air that was across the Gulf states, and of course you had this weather front that came into play yesterday and literally saturated ahead of it all of the air from Alabama eastward into the Carolinas. So some dry air that was left did get entrained into the circulation yesterday and last night, kind of slowed it down in terms of the deepening. But that finally this morning, most of that got played through. And since then, we've seen a very steady deepening process here. And it looks like it's going to deepen right up until the time it makes landfall. I don't see any evidence of any shear going on. along the Florida Panhandle and points northward. I mean, this thing looks like it's just going to come barreling through and may, it's got another couple of hours. It might drop another few millibars, and the wind might not nudge up another 5 to 10 miles per hour or so.
Yeah, one thing that we are certainly not going to see because there's too short an interval of time between now and landfall. We won't see one of the infamous eye wall replacement cycles. Uh, they usually see that when it's over water for a relatively long period of time, but there's just not enough time for the eye wall to go through that. But it is, I mean, look at that. I mean, in the final few frames of the loop, it looks like, Joe, your classic textbook hurricane. It has it all: the eye, the broad expanse, a bit of outflow as well, and again, this is rolling right up toward the panhandle of Florida. And again, look how quickly. I mean, how many? What is this? A 3-hour loop that you're looking at, or
Uh, I only have, I think, like 24 frames on here. Let me just take a look at the clock on it. I'm trying to, oh, here it is. Okay, so the first one, it actually starts at 1700 and goes to 2240. So it's a five and a
okay?
half, roughly a 5.5 hour loop.
But look how quickly it's moving in 5 or 5.5 hours, and it's only going to continue to accelerate. So this is the frightening part of this storm. I mean, it's bad enough that it's a Cat 4 with 130 to 140 mile an hour sustained winds, but now factor in that forward motion. You don't want to be directly in the path of this thing. Let's put it that way. The forward motion is going to be added into the uh, the sustained winds, and just the sheer momentum is going to. I would not be surprised, Joe, if we heard after this is all said and done of a couple of places with gusts upwards to like maybe 160, 170 miles an hour. It's that kind of a scenario. So
Well,
it's
certainly, once it's inland, if moving at a forward speed of 30 to 35 miles an hour, if you're on the east side of the center, you can add that. If it's carrying sustained winds of 50, you're going to probably looking at gusts to 80 or 85. Now,
absolutely.
maybe it tails off a little bit the further north you go, but certainly across the southern counties of Georgia, and I'm talking about, maybe a third of the way up, we'll probably be dealing with this again. You're going to have to be, the core is going to be maybe 100 miles across, maybe a little bit more. So you got to get in that, you get into that zone. That's where you're going to get clobbered with wind, and of course, we're going to continue to see heavy. There's going to be an area of very heavy rain, as Joe pointed out, with rainfall rates of several inches an hour. Usually, that looks like as if somebody took a fire hose and was running it off your roof. Okay, you're not going to be able to see very much outside. It'll be raining so hard. Now, the reconnaissance aircraft that's there right now. Okay, so I'm just refreshing this just to see what's going on. Now, these pink areas here, the darker pinks are 113 to 137 knots. So the plane is made one pass, and I'm just updating the map now. So the earlier fix was 9:48. Okay, I don't have a second fix yet here. The Hurricane Center at 7 p.m. Because there's a delay by the time they load on to tropical tidbits. There's a bit of a delay, but 948 millibars was when they had that first fix there. So there's probably a second fix. He's also got gateway problems there at tropical tidbits. So it's probably a lot of traffic. So I'm going to pull up some of these graphs here to see what we got as far as anything new. Okay, this is not close to this. These days they got two planes going at the same time. So there's a second plane that's going in there, along with the one we've got there right now. So this is the second plane. So this is mission number 18. Let me check mission 17 because we get the graph from here. And you can see, the red is the pressure, down under 945 of up until about 7:30. Okay. And 125 knot peak wind that at flight level, and that was back at about let's say 6:45, and then around five, like shortly before 6 o'clock, there's a peak wind here at 135 knots at flight level. So I mean, any way you look at this, it's a Cat 4. Okay, it's just plain and simple. It's a Cat 4. So let's take a look at the watches and warnings because they're all over the place. I mean, we've got hurricane warnings that extend pretty far inland into Georgia. I don't know if well, I got to take a look. I'm just curious at how far north these hurricane warnings actually go. Um, so we've got tropical storm warnings. You know, this color red, I can't even read the cities. I'm trying to find Atlanta. I see Athens, Georgia, but I can't see Atlanta because it's black on red. I think this is it. So they've got the darker red. So that's they have tropical storm warnings there. They have hurricane warnings, Joe, just southeast, some of the counties southeast of Atlanta, not that far. They've got hurricane warnings to just I'm just
When's the
trying
last
to
time?
I'm trying to absorb the whole idea that they've got hurricane warnings up almost as far north as the city of Atlanta. Oh, excuse me. You know, I never would have thought that I'm trying to
Well,
think now in the wintertime, I need to have blizzard warnings up here to make me feel good.
it's,
Okay.
there's always a first time for everything, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, this is really just crazy. And where's my Blairsville? Hold on. Uh, Okay, so this is Western North Carolina. These are all Asheville's under a tropical storm warning, Joe. Asheville in Western North Carolina. Murphy's only about a half an hour drive from my house. They're on the North Carolina side, so they're under a tropical storm warning. And yeah, I mean they've got tropical storm warnings up all the way up into Blairsville. I mean, this is just really I don't know. I'm just kind of marveling at all of this. It's just so bizarre. But there you have it. You've got wind advisories and high wind warnings up for the eastern Tennessee mountains, the mountains in southwestern Virginia, southeastern Kentucky. Wind advisories that go almost, Joe, but not quite to Chicago. Okay. And back into southern Illinois, southeastern Missouri. Various flood watches are also up. Northern Mississippi and southwestern Tennessee, of course, underneath all these tropical storm warnings. And with what's going on in Western Virginia, you've got flood watches underneath all that. So it's just an absolutely crazy looking map. The whole state of Florida is under a tropical storm warning. Let's look at the radar. And here's the eye is so well defined and getting tighter on this radar loop. I mean, it's really impressive here. And it's yeah, still a little bit of time though before you, like I said, probably another couple of hours at least, 2 to 3 hours before it makes landfall. And by the way, numerous tornado warnings. I saw this. I don't know what the number count is, but yeah, I certainly saw it at several points, but there were at least a half a dozen at a time. There's three of them right now that are just to the east of the Fort Myers area. You've got also a couple of red boxes popping up in southern Georgia. So the severe weather is playing up to expectations.
Lord Cade asked an interesting question on the chat board of you, Joe. You're, of course, in northern Georgia at an altitude of 2,200 feet. And she's
Right.
asking, will your higher elevation result in higher winds with gusts maybe to over 70 miles an hour?
See, that's one of the reasons why I decided not to stay, but to come down to Marietta, which is just north of it, the Atlanta metro area by about maybe 10 miles. Um, I, you know, I've seen different events over the course of the last 4 years that have produced some gusty winds, 35, 40 miles an hour, maybe 45. Uh, I don't know where the position of where I am in terms of the mountain that I'm on. I'm on Cook Mountain, so I have um, I have an open east view. Okay, So a wind from the east would be upsloping into my house. So I don't know. I don't know what the impacts are going to be. So I didn't want to take the chance of getting the wind from the wrong direction that would wind up producing, 50 or 60 or 70 mile an hour wind gusts. I will find this out tomorrow when I go home, uh, when I see what the outcome is. But it's a mystery to me. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure.
On the chat board, Tom Contino says Reed Timmer is driving directly into the center of the storm. And I said, well, who's Reed Timmer? Do you know who Reed Timmer is, Joe?
I've heard of him. He's driving what? A boat?
I
I mean, it is still out there in the Gulf of Mexico. So if he's driving a car, um, he might not. You might find that it probably doesn't float.
well, I looked him up. He said again, Reed Timmer is driving straight into the eye on YouTube. And I said, well, who the heck is Reed Timmer? Reed Timmer is an American meteorologist and storm chaser. He refers to himself as an extreme meteorologist. I'm not quite sure exactly what he means by that. Well, I guess it means he chases things
He
like
chases.
hurricanes.
He drives right. It means he drives cars into Category 4 hurricanes. I get it.
Yeah, well, but I guess he doesn't have.
That's pretty extreme.
And what is he? Generation. He was born in 1980, so he must be about 44 years old now. And I believe, let me just see on Wikipedia here, and he's married. He's been married since 2015. I hope, his wife Maria uh, has a little smile on her face, say, "Oh, okay, hon, you could drive into a Category 4 storm. I'll stay here at the house." These are situations where I think people are just GD crazy. I mean, like you are absolutely not. What does it mean that you're putting this on YouTube to show everybody that you're driving into a Cat 4 hurricane? I mean, this is one. It's one thing to chase a storm, and it's one thing to report on it. It's another thing to just literally while everybody is screaming, get away from this thing. You're going to be in big trouble. And he's driving. He's driving into this thing with the potential of encountering 8, 10, 12, 16 inches of rain and winds gusting to over 100 and some odd miles an hour. But good luck,
Well,
Reed.
better
Good
him
good
than
luck.
I'm hiding in a big house in Marietta. I feel very comfortable.
Yeah,
8 o'clock advisory is out 28.7 north, 84.3 west. Top winds are 130. They're carrying a north. This is the part that I'm really interested in is the forward speed. Right now, northeast at 23. Okay. It's probably going to eventually get up over 30 uh, as far as the forward speed is concerned. And just waiting to see U.S. watch warning update. I'm just waiting to see the they've been putting hourly updates, so probably the next one's going to be at 9 o'clock on the Hurricane Center website. By the way, while you slept last night, we got a new tropical storm in the North Atlantic, Tropical Storm Isaac. Since I have the page up, Tropical Storm Isaac is at 37.5 and 50.6. Okay. And that's moving east at 9 knots. And it is forecast, I believe, Joe, to become a hurricane. So let's bring up that map since I got it up here. Yeah, I mean, they have this becoming a hurricane sometime Friday night and continuing northeastward, probably passing actually it looks like the Azores are at what, 40 and 40 roughly, or 40 and
yeah,
30, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Looks like
yeah,
it's passing just northwest of the Azores. So that's the ninth tropical storm of the season. And the disturbance that is halfway between the Leeward Islands and the Cabo Verde, actually, I should say the other way around, the Cabo Verde Islands and the Leeward Islands is they're waiting for a well-defined circulation, but they expect this to become a tropical depression or a tropical storm a 90% chance in the next 48 hours and a 90% chance in the next 7 days. This one is going to probably never make it past 50 degrees west before it recurves out to the north, recurves to the north and northeast. So, by assuming that gets upgraded over the weekend, Joe, we'll have 10 going 10 storms done going into the month of October. Uh, so there's a shot that they could get to that bottom number in the long range forecast of the Weather Service was
17.
17.
Yeah.
So they've got time, and we're in this sort of active period, which is good. I just want to also go back to the radar because we do have flash flood warnings up for much of the Atlanta metro area and areas to the south of Atlanta under a flash flood warning. And we've got some heavier rains that are starting to move northward. And there's not much, there hasn't been much wind here. We're pretty far north. I mean, Atlanta's about 200 and I would say a good 275 miles from the Florida coastline if you were to go straight south. So add another 100 miles to where the eye of the hurricane is. So we're talking about a system that's still a good 375 miles away. So as far as the wind is concerned, it's probably not going to pick up very much until after midnight. Again, waiting for this to see how quickly it races northward once we see it make landfall. We also have some moderate rains going on throughout much of central and eastern Tennessee. It's been pouring in western North Carolina in many areas. We have a cluster of flash flood warnings again in northwestern South Carolina and some in western North Carolina. There's some lighter rain, at least aloft, that's pushed up to the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area and into southern Ohio and southern Indiana. So that's the northern fringe of this. But we're still thinking that at least as far as the Northeast is concerned, where you've got this weather front that's up to the north, you can see the showers from southeastern Maine across southern New Hampshire and back through upstate New York to about the Catskills and northern Pennsylvania. They kind of thin out a bit by the time you get that far west. That front's coming through, and you know some of the high level moisture from this is from the system to the south is probably going to be around for much of the weekend. And that's sort of put a dent on the idea that there's going to be nice weather, sunshine and blue skies and, cloud free conditions. That's not going to happen this weekend, Joe.
No, it's not. And in fact, if anything, I said that tomorrow, I believe, for the Hudson Valley, the lower Hudson Valley will be a dry day. Cloudy, but dry. Saturday, I think we're going to see an increasing threat of some light showers or sprinkles, especially by the afternoon. And then as we move into Sunday, I do have some hope that we might actually see the sun put in a cameo appearance by the afternoon. But what looked like only several days ago looked like a beautiful weekend, blue sky, bright sunshine, and now that just went right into the you know where. And
Hmm.
all we're going to be looking at now is probably more often than not clouds and occasionally some, at least admittedly, nothing heavy, but some spotty light precipitation from time to time and from place to place. And guess what, Joe?
What?
Uncle Bill Goodman is on tonight. And
Oh,
as
he's,
soon as
he's on the chat board?
and yeah, and as soon as Bill checked in on the chat board, Tom Contino immediately said, "Bill Goodman, the color codes on the watches and warnings are awful. You guys at the National Weather Service need to look at this. You could hardly read the names and the shades are too similar." And I'm saying to myself, Tom must think that Bill Goodman wields tremendous power
Well,
at the.
Joe, if he doesn't, he should. Okay. I mean, let's be clear about this. Okay. If
Tom,
he
you should have made that. You should have registered that complaint last week when I was actually in the same room and chatting with the head of the Eastern region of the National Weather Service. All the way that the Eastern region covers the whole area from Florida all the way up to Maine. And I could have gone up to him and I said, Dr. Thule, you ought to hear this. Tom Contino doesn't like the colors on your maps, and you should change them now.
I can't get into tropical tidbits because everybody else apparently is.
Yeah.
So I have Pivotal up. I actually have the European up, and here we are. This is right now uh, 0Z, and then this is at 6Z. The European's a little bit to the left of the GFS, and the icon is also a little bit of the left of the GFS. Not by much; it's a handful of miles, just for my purposes, because the European, from what I'm looking at this, just on an eyeball, brings the actual center right over where I live in northern Georgia. So, that's the reason why I came down to the Atlanta metro area, because it looks like the low passes just to the east of the Atlanta metro area. Still going to get into some hefty rains and gusty, strong winds during the overnight period. But as Joe said, start to see this. There's this breakaway moisture that's in South and North Carolina that runs up into Virginia, then starts to thin out because of drier air in southeastern New England. So you do have some rain that gets into southeast PA, almost to southeast PA. It does get a little bit of rain, gets into Maryland and Delaware Friday evening, and pushes up to about New York City during the overnight Friday night. And then by Saturday morning, it's mostly gone. Fires up some very light precip Saturday afternoon and evening, but it's really light and spotty stuff. And then it's a little better on Sunday. So I think that makes sense, I think. And by the way, also follow the low here, which runs up into Georgia. And then, still back tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we're still looking at a low that's what is that, a 981? That's in central Kentucky. I mean, that's incredible.
109, 109 likes, Joe.
Excellent. Um, and I can't see the chat board because I'm only on one monitor tonight. But I mean, this is something that I never imagined seeing something like this. I mean, this is just, you know, I'm in awe. The whole atmosphere has got me in awe over this. So,
I hope you're happy, Tom. I did ring the bell, so we didn't have to get Mrs. Rayo to make a Macy's PA announcement to ring the bell.
yeah, that would not have been a good thing. Exactly. Um, By the way, I want to just give a big welcome to everybody on the chat board, and welcome to those of you who are watching in the background tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We are on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. And normally we're off on Fridays and Saturdays. And I think we're going to be off tomorrow and Saturday because I've got driving to do and a little bit of recovery. So we'll be back Sunday night. Will be when we come back at 7:35 p.m. Subscribe and you won't miss us. If you like the show, hit the like button and turn your notifications on too, so you don't miss us. Uh, Trying to think if there was just, I got to end the show a little bit earlier tonight, Joe, because being at my daughter's house, my grandkids are now in bed. So if I keep going on a longer show, I don't want to wake them up. So
Understood.
keep your fingers crossed that I can get home tomorrow and that there isn't a tree on my house.
Yeah, that's I can empathize. I think I feel the same way you do now. When I left for work on the day that Sandy was moving into the tri-state area, and I made a silent, I looked at the sky. I said, I'm willing to go like 5 days without power as long as you don't drop a tree on my house. And I'm
Right.
surrounded by tall trees. Anything is better than that. And yeah, we hope that everything is fine over at your residence, and we'll hopefully be together again on Sunday.
All right. All right, folks. Have a great night. We will see you back on Sunday. Stay
Let me just
safe.
ask let me just ask one question, and I have my own opinions and thoughts. Tomorrow night, the Atlanta Braves, who are still playing at home, are supposed to play a baseball game against the Kansas City Royals. Do you think that they will be able to play a baseball game tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock in Atlanta, or will they just simply throw up their arms and
They
say,
they might. I mean, the rain's going to be done once the low passes. There's not going to be much of anything rain wise to the south of that.
right?
It may be windy. There might be a screaming west wind for much of the day, but as far
Right.
as rain is concerned, after the low lifts up, it's done. So I can't see why they wouldn't play.
Well, it'll be a question of whether or not the field is going to be in shape, considering all the rain that is anticipated.
Right.
Although
Well,
I
that
have
I
seen,
that I can't that I couldn't tell you.
I have seen them play. They keep the infield, of course, covered under a tarp, but that outfield, I've seen games where the outfield is like a semi quagmire. You see a fly ball to right field, and the right field is running, and you can see him splashing. Uh, so there's a Vincent Croce. I don't know if Kansas City got into Atlanta. That's another question. I mean, are the airports closed in Atlanta right now, or
I don't know. I'm not sure.
you know?
I'm not sure. All right, got to run. So we'll
Okay,
see. Okay. See y'all on Sunday.